It goes against every mother's instinct, and yet Annette Corriveau wants to end her children's lives. What you are about to hear in this exclusive interview might sound disturbing, but this mother of two says no one can understand unless they watch, as she did, as her children succumbed to severe mental and physical disability caused by a rare genetic disorder. Now, as adults, her son and daughter are non-responsive and use a feeding tube. Were it not for modern-day science, the law of nature would not see their survival. But here, the law of a nation keeps them alive. Tonight, a mother's plea for mercy and the father who has been down this road and paid the price.
That's it. That's the sound every parent longs to hear. The healthy cry of their newborn baby, and with it, the promise of endless possibilities.
People were saying, millionaire's family, a boy and a girl, what more do you want?
But Annette Corriveau was left wanting much more. Her babies, Janet and then Jeffrey, weren't as healthy as they first appeared. But never could she have imagined the tragic turn those perfect little lives would take, and 30 years later, how different those once healthy cries would become.
If Janet and Jeffrey were able to make a decision about life the way it is with them, that they would opt for the suicide.
Annette wants the right to kill her children mercifully. She couldn't be farther from the life she imagined that first day of motherhood.
They wouldn't like to live like this. And I wish I could say that without being so emotional, but my children were full of life when they were young, before this disease took hold. I just don't believe that they would want to stay alive the way they are.
It's been a 40-year journey getting to this crossroads, one that began with an unlikely match, Annette and her then-husband Lou.
He came from Newfoundland, and I was born in Holland, and we immigrated in 1958.
They discovered their odds of meeting and falling in love and having children were 1 in 500,000. But in 1969, they did all of those things.
And I always said, I got married so early, I'd be a grandmother at 40, you know? I could be a grandmother at 40, but that didn't happen.
Instead, the genetic lottery had 2 unknowing, unlucky contestants. Hidden deep in the couple's DNA was a recessive gene that would prevent not one, but both of Annette and Lou's children from properly metabolizing sugars, leading to a rise and fall in mental and physical abilities. It's called Sanfilippo syndrome, rooted in a gene that lays dormant, only activated by another's exact match. When Lou and Annette, each with this recessive gene, conceived Janet and then Jeffrey, born with their babies was this rare disorder that would only reveal itself over time.
You're prepared for the terrible 2s, so you overlook things. And then the 3s come and you're thinking, wait a minute, this shouldn't have lasted this long. And then the 4s, all of a sudden, it's, something is not right.
By the time the 2 entered kindergarten, it was becoming obvious that Janet and Jeffrey were developing special needs.
They were tested, and the end result was that they were both mildly retarded. Nobody could give us an answer why.
Did that hit you?
Like a ton of bricks.
A light load compared to what was coming. By the time Janet and Jeffrey turned 5 and 6 years old, their behavior was becoming more rambunctious and more unmanageable. They were losing the language they had developed, losing motor skills. It was suggested the kids go to a hospital in London, Ontario for further testing. Annette thought they'd be gone a month, returned to her with answers.
But they stayed for 1.5 years. 1.5 years they stayed in London.
It's where they finally got diagnosed. Sanfilippo syndrome, no cure, not even a treatment. They were told their kids' behavior would get worse and that their physical characteristics would begin to change. They'd develop bushy eyebrows, full lips, dwarfism, and behavioral problems. All features in the 1 in 70,000 people who have Sanfilippo syndrome. Age 7 and age 8 was the beginning of the siblings' institutional life. This is a day like any other and every other, always the same. Today is unique because Annette, their mother, has come for a visit. Janet lies in bed until a caregiver moves her. She can't do anything but breathe on her own. Her mother isn't convinced she even knows what's happening. Her caregiver says she makes these noises when she's stressed. Her son, Annette says, is in a more severe condition. It wasn't always like this. Janet and Jeffrey used to talk, used to walk. They loved watching TV together, playing together. Like any toddler, Janet would suck her fingers for comfort. Jeffrey loved riding his trike and playing music. They used to be well enough to come home on weekends, but they haven't left this facility in 2 decades.
Jeffrey, they have said for years already that they don't think he can hear or see, but how do you judge? The same with brain activity. How do you judge how much?
And how do you judge what's enough to merit staying alive?
Life, yeah. It's the same as a comatose patient. There is sometimes brain activity, but how much? I don't know how to answer that question either.
Every day around noon, the two are wheeled here for the hour and a half it takes for lunch. They can't be fed real food or even pureed. They'd choke. Feeding tubes have been attached to their stomachs to keep them alive. Jeffrey hasn't tasted food in 17 years. Janet in 5. When the feeding tubes went in is when Annette first thought about taking control of her children's lives herself.
If God had wanted them to live past adulthood, then the tubes wouldn't have been needed. But the tubes are allowing them to exist. Without the tubes, they wouldn't be here. This is no life for anyone.
How long are you willing to let them go on like this?
I have no choice. There have been times when I thought of doing something myself.
You know, so many people might think, how could she do this?
But the saying, walk in another man's moccasins, don't judge. Unless you've been there, don't judge.
There is someone who's walked Annette's path and farther, a lot farther.
It'll soon be 20 years. It's over 18 now. So, since they arrested me.
You're maybe the one person in this country that could truly relate to her.
I was just doing something that had to be done. It was the right thing to do.
Next on 16 by 9, he took his child's life to end the pain.
I continually say I'm right, I was right, and what I did was right.
Was it good or evil?
Robert Latimer, Canadian canola farmer, father of 3, and convicted of second-degree murder. In 1993, he ended the life of his severely disabled daughter, Tracy. Never before has Canadian law and Canadian morality ever been so conflicted. Overwhelmingly, the Canadian public supported Latimer's decision.
I continually say I'm right, I was right, and what I did was right.
But in his battle between law and morality, the law won.
Overwhelmingly, Canadian public opinion believed that Latimer was a loving father and killed his daughter, Tracy, ended her life because he wanted to end her suffering. That was also overwhelmingly the verdict of the jury and of the judge who heard all the evidence, that this was truly a mercy killing.
Latimer's case has been studied extensively. Arthur Schaefer teaches medical ethics at the University of Manitoba. debating and contrasting the law and the morality of what Canadians believed should have happened versus what did.
And the Canadian criminal law is very inflexible. If you deliberately take the life of another person, regardless of your motive, that's considered murder. Whether mercy killing is sometimes morally warranted, and also whether, given that he was convicted and sentenced, whether he got the sentence he deserved.
Second-degree murder carries a mandatory life sentence, but the jury allegedly didn't know that. That's what Latimer got. Spent 10 years in prison and will spend the rest of his days on parole for doing what he says was right. Even the jury thought was merciful. In 1980, his daughter Tracy was born with cerebral palsy.
At the age of 4, she had the first operation, and she lost the ability to roll from her front to her back.
A series of prior surgeries combined with regular seizures, Latimer says left his already severely disabled daughter in constant pain.
Having been through 4 surgeries, and they always seem to get worse. She had 2 rods implanted in her back, so she would have needed at least a year to heal. And prior to that, her hip had already become dislocated.
It had to be so painful.
Yeah, there were quite a few people that were pretty sure she wasn't.
Were you sure she was?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So what about pain medication?
Well, she was on seizure medication, so she couldn't take much for the pain.
Not opting for another pain medication was what the Supreme Court cited as Latimer's true crime, an option Latimer always maintained they didn't have. Instead, doctors decided Tracy would need another surgery to prevent her hip from continuing to dislocate with every seizure. For Latimer, limited pain medication options meant his daughter was going to suffer. He and his wife, Laura, couldn't bear the thought of her femur being severed and the possibility their daughter again would be sentenced to live in so much pain. When did you get where you thought, I can't let this child live this way anymore?
It was when they said what the operation was. Laura was just telling me what it was, and she said she wished Jack Kevorkian she could call him, so I didn't really discuss it with her.
Latimer knew what he was going to do. He decided to kill his daughter by carbon monoxide poisoning in his truck.
It didn't take long at all, about 5 or 10 minutes.
Did you want to stop yourself, or did you feel good about it?
No, it's not a sense of feeling good or anything like that.
But a peace?
Yeah, you could really tell when you picked up her body. She was at peace.
Were you?
I suppose. Yeah, in some regards, yeah.
Tracy's end was the beginning of Latimer's new battle, not just with the law, but with religious fundamentalists. A battle he says anyone considering euthanasia may not be aware of. 2 decades since Latimer's decision is where Annette Corriveau sits today. She wants the right to legally do what Latimer did. She wants to end the lives of both of her adult children, both born with a rare genetic disorder that has seen them go from healthy babies to helpless adults, she says, with little brain function or ability to interact. And neither her son Jeffrey or daughter Janet have left this facility since 1996.
I've seen them deteriorate to this stage, and I know when they were alert and when they were aware of their surroundings, and I know for the last 15, 20 years they have not been aware of their surroundings.
But staff say they're certain Annette's daughter Janet can still sometimes make eye contact. Some might argue that's enough to keep them around. That gives them the right to live.
But it just scares the hell out of me.
What do you want for them?
I want peace for them.
Is any of this about you?
No, I don't think it's about me. I think it breaks my heart to see them just exist. And I think if they were able to, they wouldn't want to live like this. I certainly wouldn't. I don't know anybody who would.
Both Janet and Jeffrey are being kept alive with feeding tubes, which is where Annette's situation takes a turn away from Latimer's. In Canada, it's illegal to mercy kill. However, the law will allow a feeding tube to be removed.
And is it of benefit to these two patients to have their lives supported with tube feeding?
That's what Annette can't fathom. Legally, you can take them off the feeding tubes.
I know, but then they would starve to death, and I couldn't live with that. That's very inhumane.
Inhumane, but legal in Canada. Feeding tubes can be removed, life support withdrawn.
It happens thousands of times a year in Canada. Life support isn't initiated, it's withheld, or having been initiated, when they discover that the patient isn't benefiting from the life support because, for example, they're in an irreversible vegetative state, the treatment is withheld. That's not called mercy killing. It used to be called passive euthanasia, but now it's just called an appropriate treatment decision.
So do you have any faith that it'll one day be legal to do what you did?
I think it's done all the time. The religious types can really differentiate between giving someone drugs that eases their pain and giving them excessive drugs to ease their pain. Like, that's called medication, whereas something I did is called murder to them.
Do you think if push came to shove and the law changed here in Canada, you could really do it?
Yes. Yes. As I say, this is no life.
It's easy to say you have to think of the child first, and that the law doesn't think that way. The law thinks of the law first.
In Annette's mind, she also knows what's right. It's vastly different than the laws, and in Canada comes with serious consequences. You still love your kids?
Of course.
But like Latimer, it's not the death of her children she can't face. It's the agony she feels, keeping them alive.